You wake up at 3 a.m. and your mind goes straight to the news. Not your bills, not your to-do list. The news. The headlines about wars, about leaders making promises that feel too good to be true. About a world that seems to be shifting under your feet, and somewhere underneath all of that, a question you've never quite said out loud. What would I actually do if it happened? Not in some far-off future. Now, today, this week. Maybe you felt that exact thing while scrolling through your phone before bed, watching one more clip about instability somewhere in the world, and feeling that tight knot settle into your chest. Or maybe it's quieter than that. You're sitting in church on a Sunday. Everything looks normal, everyone's smiling, and yet there's this small, persistent whisper in the back of your mind. Is anyone actually paying attention to what's happening? Here's what I want you to know before we go any further. You are not imagining this, you are not being dramatic, and you are not alone in feeling it. Recent research has shown that a majority of adults report feeling more anxious about global events than they did even a year ago. Concerns about safety, about the economy, about the world feeling less stable. That's not a fringe feeling. That's the room you're sitting in right now, and it's full of people just like you. But here's the thing, and I say this gently, Jesus already addressed this. Not in some obscure footnote, not in a passage tucked away where no one reads. He addressed it directly in response to a question his own followers asked him, face to face, on a hillside outside Jerusalem.
He did not say,
and his answer wasn't vague. It wasn't a list of feelings to manage. It was specific. It was practical. And this might surprise you. His very first instruction had almost nothing to do with the events themselves. So if you've ever wondered what Jesus would actually say to you right now, in this moment of uncertainty, stay with me. Because by the end of this, I think you're going to see this familiar passage in a way you never have before. There's a passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, where Jesus' own disciples come to him privately with a question. Not a theological debate, a real, personal, urgent question. When will these things happen? What will be the sign? And what's remarkable is what Jesus does next. He doesn't dodge the question. He doesn't tell them it's not for them to know. He answers at length, with detail, with care. And the very first thing he says sets the tone for everything that follows. Here's the central question this entire message is going to walk through with you. When Jesus described a moment of crisis so significant that he gave his followers a specific physical instruction, what was that instruction, and why does it matter for the anxious heart you're carrying today? To understand the weight of this, we need to sit with the broader context for a moment. Jesus often pointed his disciples back to the prophet Daniel, a book written centuries earlier, during a time when God's people were living under foreign occupation. Watching their temple and their way of life threatened by powers far beyond their control. Daniel's writings carried this recurring theme. Even in the middle of overwhelming political upheaval, God's people were never abandoned. There was always a thread of preservation running through the chaos. Jesus picks up that thread in Matthew 24 and ties it directly to his own followers' future. Pay attention to this, because what Jesus says next isn't abstract. It's not a riddle meant to be debated by scholars for 2,000 years and never applied. It's something he expects his followers, people just like you, sitting where you're sitting, to actually act on. There's a supporting passage worth holding onto here, from the Apostle Paul, writing to a young church that was confused and afraid. They thought a major moment of crisis had already begun, and they were panicking, wondering if they'd missed something, if they were already too late. Paul wrote to calm them down, and what he told them lines up directly with what Jesus had already taught. There is a sequence to these things. There is an order. Nothing happens randomly, and nothing happens without God's full awareness. That should land differently than you might expect, because if there's a sequence, if there's an order, then nothing that happens. Even something that feels sudden and overwhelming catches God off guard. He's not reacting. He's not scrambling. The plan was already in place before the moment arrived. So here's where the tension sits. Jesus describes a moment, a specific, recognizable moment, and he says when you see it, Here is exactly what you do.
Beneath them,
And the instruction he gives is so direct, so physical, so immediate, that it should change the way you think about preparation, about security, and honestly,
Jesus did not
about where
hand them
you're
a calendar.
placing your trust right
He gave
now.
them discernment.
We're going to look
His
at
first
exactly what that instruction was. We're going to look at the original language behind it,
Watch out
because
that no one
there's a
deceive.
word here that gets softened in modern translations.
Many would come in his name,
And once you
claiming
understand what it
authority,
actually meant,
claiming answers.
the urgency Jesus intended becomes unmistakable. We're going to look at how real people, in real history, lived out this exact instruction,
False
and what
deliverers
happened to the ones who
understand that
didn't.
hunger. They
And we're going to bring it all the way back around to you, to
Without
the
surrender,
anxiety, to
unity
the 3
without
a.m.
truth.
thoughts, to the question of where your security actually comes from.
crave
One more
relief.
thing before we
Then
go
Jesus
there. Hold on to this question as we move forward.
wars.
If Jesus,
Nations
who calmed
rising against
storms,
nations.
who healed the sick with
Kingdoms
a word,
against kingdoms.
who had more power
Famine.
than anyone who has ever walked the earth, gave an instruction that wasn't stand firm
Still
or
to
don't
come.
worry,
These are the
but something else entirely. What does that tell you about what he
Willing, something
understands
greater
about both
approaching.
danger and
pain
safety?
that increases in
Let's
frequency.
look at the passage itself. From the King James Version, Matthew chapter 24, verses 15
Then the
and
warning
16.
became personal.
When ye
You will be-
therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso
But not
readeth,
remain
let
distant.
him understand.
It would touch
Then
families,
let them which be in
friendships,
Judea flee
communities.
into the mountains.
Betrayal would multiply.
Read that again slowly.
Many would turn away. Love
Flee
would
into
grow
the
cold.
mountains. Now
Lawlessness-
here's where the original language opens something up that most people miss
Fear
entirely.
becomes constant.
The word
Compassion
translated
shrinks.
flee comes from the
Survival
Greek word
instincts
fugo.
replace sacrificial
According
love.
to Strong's
Still,
Concordance and the
hope remained
lexical
anchored in
entries at
endurance.
Blue Letter Bible,
The one who
this
stands
word
firm
means
to
to
the
run
end will be
away,
saved.
literally, physically run.
Endurance is not
And it's
passive
the
survival.
same root word
It
that
is
gives
active
us our
loyalty.
English word
It is holding
fugitive.
the truth when lies
It's
feel
used
easier.
elsewhere in the
It is
New
continuing
Testament to
obedience
describe
when
someone fleeing
obedience
for their
becomes
life
costly.
from immediate
And the
danger.
gospel of the kingdom
Commentators
will be
who have
preached in the
studied
whole
this
world
passage
as a
in depth
testimony
note
to all
something
nations.
significant about
And
the
then
grammar
end will
here
come.
too.
History is
The
not
verb is
spiraling
in what's
aimlessly.
called the present
It is
imperative,
advancing toward a
which carries
conclusion
the sense
God
of
has
keep
already
on
appointed.
fleeing,
Then
not a
Jesus
one-time
shifted from
glance over
general
the
patterns
shoulder,
to
but
a decisive
sustained,
signal.
continuous
When you
movement
see
away from
standing in the
danger.
holy place
This
the
wasn't
abomination
Jesus
of
speaking in
desolation
riddles.
spoken of through the prophet
This
Daniel.
was Jesus
Let the
using the
reader
clearest
understand.
possible word
Then
for
let
run
those
for
who
your
are in
life,
Judea flee
and
to the
choosing it
mountains.
deliberately. Now let's
That
put
phrase,
ourselves in the world of
let
the
the reader
people Jesus
understand,
was speaking to.
carries weight. It
Judea,
is a
in the
signal
first
flare
century,
across
was a
generations.
region under
Daniel
Roman
described
occupation.
the desecration
The
that
people
would trigger
listening to
unparalleled
Jesus that
distress.
day on the Mount
Jesus
of Olives
confirms
knew what
There will
military
be great
upheaval looked
tribulation,
like.
unequaled
They'd
from the
grown up
beginning of the
hearing
world
stories,
until now,
and some
and
had
never
lived
to
through
be equaled
moments
again.
where
If
Roman
those days
forces
had not
moved
been
through the
cut short,
region with
no one
overwhelming
would survive.
force.
But for the
The
sake
temple
of the
in
elect,
Jerusalem
those
wasn't
days
just
will
a
be shortened.
religious building
His
to them.
instructions
It
were
was the
shockingly
center of their
practical.
identity,
If you are
their
in Judea,
worship,
flee.
their
Do
entire
not
sense
pause
of
to
God's
evaluate.
presence among
Do
them.
not debate the interpretation.
So when Jesus told
Move.
them that something
If
would
you are on the
happen in that
housetop,
very
do not
temple,
go down to take
something he
anything out of the
called
house.
the abomination of
Rooftops were
desolation,
places of daily life.
language borrowed
Yet in that
directly
moment,
from the prophet
retrieving
Daniel,
possessions
he was
would cost
describing the
precious seconds.
unthinkable.
If you are in the
The
field,
one place that
do not go
represented
back for your
safety
cloak.
and sacredness
Comfort
would
will
become
become
the
a
very
trap.
signal to run.
Attachment will slow
And notice,
escape.
Jesus
Woe to
pauses
those who are
mid-sentence
pregnant
to say
and
something
nursing in those
unusual.
days.
Whoso
Flight will be
readeth,
physically
let him
demanding.
understand.
Pray that your
Most
escape
teachings
will not
don't
take
stop
place
to
in
address the
winter
reader
or on the
directly.
Sabbath. Not
But this one
superstition,
does.
reality.
It's as if
Winter
Jesus is
complicates
reaching
travel.
across time,
Closed
looking
gates
directly
delay
at the
movement.
person who will one day be
Circumstances
reading
will
these
narrow
words
options.
and saying,
Then
pay
again,
attention.
deception
This
returns to
isn't
the center.
background
If
information.
anyone says to
This
you,
is for you.
look,
Here's
here's the
something
Messiah,
most people read right
or,
past.
there he
Jesus
is,
doesn't say when you
do not
hear
believe
about
it.
it. He doesn't say when
False
someone tells you it
messiahs and
happened.
false prophets
He
will
says
appear
when
and
ye shall
perform
see.
great signs
This is
and wonders to
firsthand.
deceive.
This is something
If possible,
the person
even the
experiences
elect.
directly.
Pain makes people
Immediately,
vulnerable to
and the response
spectacular
isn't
claims.
contemplation.
Suffering
It's not
makes
discuss
secret
this with your
promises
community
attractive.
first.
So if anyone
It's not
tells
wait
you,
for confirmation.
there he is,
The
out
very
in the
next
wilderness,
words are the
do
instruction
not
to
go out,
flee
or,
immediately into the
here he
mountains.
is, in the inner
Why
rooms,
mountains, though?
do not believe it.
Here's something that should
The
genuinely
true return
surprise
of
you,
Christ
and it
will
comes
not
straight from
require whispered
historical
directions.
record, not
It will not
speculation.
depend on private
According to
revelations.
early church
It will not be
historians,
hidden. For
Eusebius
as
of
lightning that
Caesarea,
comes from the
writing
east
in the
is
4th
visible even
century,
in the west,
and
so
later
will be the coming of the
Epiphanius
Son
of
of Man.
Salamis,
Lightning
there's a
does not ask
documented
permission to
tradition
be
that
noticed.
before the Roman
It splits the
destruction of
sky with
Jerusalem in
clarity.
70 AD,
Instant,
the
global,
Christian community
undeniable.
living in that city
Immediately
received
after the
warning to
distress of those days.
and
The
they
sun will
relocated
be
across
darkened.
the Jordan
The
River
moon
to
will
a
not give
region
its
called
light.
Pella.
The stars will fall from
Eusebius
the sky,
records that this
and
happened
the heavenly
by an
bodies will
oracular
be shaken.
revelation delivered to
Creation
worthy
itself
men,
responding
a
to its
divine
creator.
warning,
Then will appear
prompting
the
departure
sign of the
before the
Son of
disaster
Man in
came.
heaven. All the peoples of the
Historical
earth will
accounts
mourn
describe
when they
how the
see him
siege that
coming on the
followed was
clouds with
devastating
power
for
and
those who
great
remained
glory.
in
He will
Jerusalem.
send his angels
But the
with a
community that
loud
had
trumpet call,
relocated by
and they will
historical
gather his
tradition
elect from
was
the four
not present
winds,
for that
from one
devastation.
end of the heavens to the
Now,
other. The one who
scholars
warned with
debate the
precision
details
will
of this
rescue with
tradition.
precision.
Some question
Jesus then
exactly
offered
when
a
it
simple
happened
lesson.
and exactly
Now
how it
learn this
unfolded,
lesson from the fig
and
tree.
intellectual
As
honesty
soon as
matters
its
here.
twigs get tender
So I won't
and its
pretend
leaves
the
come out,
historical record
you know
is
that
simple
summer is
or
near.
unanimous.
Discernment is
But
possible.
here's what's not in
Seasons
dispute.
can be recognized.
The pattern
When you
Jesus
see all these
described,
things,
recognize the
know that
moment,
it is
don't
near,
delay, get
right
to
at
a
the
place
door.
outside the
Yet
reach
tension
of what's
remains.
coming has
But
precedent.
about that day
It's
or
not a
hour, no one
hypothetical.
knows. Not even the
Believers
angels in
in real
heaven,
history
nor the
faced a
Son,
version of
but only the
exactly this
Father.
choice. This is where the
Recognizable
first
season.
thing I told you
Unknown
at the
timing.
very beginning
This
comes back
combination
around.
prevents complacency
Remember
and
that
prevents
question.
calculation.
What does it tell
It
you
calls
about
for
danger
vigilance.
and safety
As it
when the
was in the
most
days of
powerful
Noah,
being who
so it
ever
will
walked
be
the
at the
earth
coming of
tells
the
his
Son of
people to
Man.
run rather
People
than
were
stand?
eating and drinking,
Here's the answer the
marrying
text
and giving in
itself gives
marriage,
us.
living routine
Jesus
lives until
follows
the
up the
day
command
Noah
to flee
entered the
with
ark.
this from
They knew
verses
nothing about what would
17 and
happen until the
18.
flood came
Let him
and
which is
took
on
them
the
all
housetop
away.
not come down to
Normalcy
take
can
anything
hide
out of his
approaching
house.
judgment.
Neither
Two
let
men
him
will
which
be in
is
the
in the
field.
field
One will
return
be
back to
taken,
take his
and the other
clothes.
left. Two women
Think
will
about
be
what that's
grinding with a
saying.
hand mill.
In first
One
century
will be
homes,
taken,
flat
and the other
rooftops
left.
were
The
common
shock is
gathering
not only
places.
separation, but
Jesus
suddenness.
says, if you're up
Everything
there,
ordinary
don't even
until
go
it
back
isn't.
down inside for
Therefore
your
keep watch,
belongings.
because you
If
do
you're
not
out
know
working
on
in a
what day your
field,
Lord
don't
will
go home
come.
for your coat.
If the owner of the
This is
house
about
had
timing
known at
so
what time
tight
of
that
night the
even
thief
minutes
was coming,
matter.
he
And
would
he
have
goes
stayed
on
awake.
in verses
So you also
19 and
must be
20
ready,
with something
because the Son
tender.
of Man
And
will
woe
come at an
unto
hour
them that are
when
with
you do
child,
not expect
and to
it.
them that
Who
give
then
suck in
is the
those days.
faithful and wise
But pray
servant,
ye that your
the one
flight
whom
be
the
not in the
master has put
winter,
in charge to give the
neither
other
on the
servants their
Sabbath day?
food at the
He
proper time?
acknowledges with
It
real
will be good for
compassion
that
that this
servant whose
instruction
master
will be
finds him
hardest for
doing
the most
so when he
vulnerable,
returns.
and his response isn't to
Faithfulness in
dismiss that
routine days
difficulty.
prepares
It's
the
to
heart
point
for
them toward
extraordinary
prayer.
ones.
Pray
But
about the
suppose that
timing.
servant is wicked and says
Pray
to
about the
himself,
conditions.
"My master
God
is staying
cares
away a
about the
long time,"
details of your
and he
hardship,
begins to
even in
beat
the
his
middle
fellow
of urgent
servants and to
instruction.
eat and
So
drink with
here's what this
drunkards.
passage
Delay
actually
becomes
reveals when you
justification.
slow down and really
Complacency
sit with
becomes
it.
corruption.
The
The
command to
master of
flee
that
isn't
servant
about
will come on a
panic.
day when he does
It's
not
about
expect him,
recognition,
and at an hour
recognizing
he
a
is not
moment
aware
for
of.
what it is,
The lesson
and
is not
responding
panic.
without the
It is
delay that comes from
perseverance,
disbelief,
not obsession with
attachment,
dates,
or simply
but
not
devotion
wanting
in
it to
daily
be
life.
true.
Do
Now
not
let's
anchor your
widen the
confidence
lens.
to what looks permanent.
Because this
Do not
theme,
let
God's
delay
people
convince
being
you that
instructed to
accountability
leave a
is
place of
canceled.
danger for a
Do
place
not
of
let fear
refuge,
drive you
isn't
toward
unique to
counterfeit
Matthew
saviors.
24.
And when the
It's a
decisive moment
thread that
arrives,
runs through the
obedience
entire
must
Bible,
move
and
faster
once
than
you start
hesitation,
seeing it, you'll
because the
notice
one
it
who spoke
everywhere.
these warnings is the
Go back to
same
the book
one
of
who
Genesis.
promised to gather
When the
his
city
own.
of Sodom
History
faced
will not
judgment,
end in
the
confusion.
instruction to
It
Lot
will
and his
end in
family was the
revelation.
same in
Lightning
essence.
across the sky,
Leave, don't
trumpet
look
across
back,
the
don't
heavens,
delay.
glory breaking through
Jesus
darkness.
actually references
Stay
this
awake,
story directly
stand
later in
firm,
Luke's account of this
endure,
same
and
teaching,
let the
Luke
reader
17,
understand.
31 through 33, where he says, "Remember Lot's wife. She physically left the city, but something in her longing, attachment, regret pulled her attention backward, and Jesus uses her as a permanent example of the danger of trying to hold onto what you're leaving behind while also trying to move toward safety. You can't fully do both." Then there's Revelation chapter 12. Verse 6, which describes the woman, understood by many scholars as representing God's faithful people, fleeing into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God. Notice that phrase, prepared, not discovered in a panic, not stumbled upon, prepared in advance by God Himself before it was ever needed. This is where I want to introduce something many people have never heard about, even though it's documented in early church history. There's a long-standing tradition, going back at least to the 4th century, recorded by Eusebius, that some of the earliest followers of Jesus actually lived out this exact pattern. They didn't wait until the danger was undeniable to everyone. According to the historical account, they received warning, and by tradition, many didn't hesitate. You may be carrying something right now that you cannot find words for. Maybe it's not a single crisis. Maybe it's a slow, grinding sense that the ground beneath everything feels less steady than it used to. Maybe you've been praying about it for months, and it feels like like silence on the other end. If the world around you feels unstable right now, I need you to stay with me. Because everything we've looked at so far, the instruction to flee, the place prepared in advance, the historical pattern of believers who took God's warning seriously, all of it is building towards something. There's a question underneath all of this that we haven't answered yet. If the instruction is this specific, this urgent, this physically demanding, what is it actually protecting people from? And more importantly, what does a place prepared by God actually mean for someone who isn't living in first-century Judea, who can't literally run to a mountain range? Here's where this gets personal. I want you to hear this directly, because I think it's for you. If you've ever felt like you're the one who has to figure everything out, who has to have the plan, the backup plan, the resources stockpiled, the answer ready before the question is even asked, I want you to notice something about the passage we've been walking through. Jesus doesn't tell his followers to prepare in the way we usually think of preparation. He doesn't say stockpile supplies or fortify your position. He says flee, which actually means the opposite of self-reliant preparation. It means leaving behind what you've built, what you've gathered, what you've secured, and moving toward a place that you didn't build and didn't secure, a place that was prepared for you. Here's the insight that changes how this whole passage reads. The word used in Revelation 12:6, a place prepared of God, echoes language used throughout Scripture for God's provision before the need ever arises. Before Israel needed bread in the wilderness, God had already planned to provide manna. Before Elijah needed food during a famine, God had already directed ravens to a specific brook. The provision always comes before the panic. The preparation is God's responsibility, not yours. If that's true, then the anxious feeling that says, I have to have this figured out, I have to be the one who secures my own safety, that feeling, as real and understandable as it is, may be pointing you toward the wrong source of security entirely. Think about what that means for the way you pray. If you've been praying, God, help me figure out what to do if things get worse. What if the deeper prayer is, God, help me trust that you have already prepared what I'll need even though I can't see it yet? Those are two very different postures. One keeps you in the driver's seat, white-knuckling control. The other releases control not into uncertainty, but into a person who has a track record of preparing in advance. This changes how you read the news, too. Not by making you indifferent to what's happening in the world. Jesus doesn't call his followers to indifference. But it does change the emotional center of gravity. Instead of, I need to watch everything so I'm not caught off guard, it becomes, I can stay aware without staying anxious, because awareness and trust aren't opposites. And it changes how you face that 3 a.m. moment. The next time your mind goes straight to worry, here's something true you can hold on to. The same God who told his people exactly what to do in a moment of crisis, specifically, practically, with compassion for the hardest circumstances, is not a distant God. He's not a God who issues instructions and walks away. He's a God who prepares places, prepares provision, and prepares paths before the person walking them even knows they'll need it. This is the kind of truth that's worth sitting with, not rushing past. He has already prepared what you will need. So what does this actually mean for you today? In 2026, not in some hypothetical future, but in the actual life you're living right now, here's something grounded and real. Recent research has shown that a significant majority of people, across many different countries, report feeling that economic conditions, global tensions, and the spread of misinformation make the world feel less predictable than it used to. That's not your imagination, and it's not weakness. It's a documented, widespread experience. You are part of a very large group of people who are carrying some version of this weight. And here's what the passage we've walked through speaks directly into that. The anxiety you feel when you read another unsettling headline, that feeling is your awareness working exactly as it should. Jesus never told his followers to be unaware. He told them to pay attention, to recognize what they were seeing. The problem isn't the awareness. The problem is when awareness has nowhere to go, when there's no anchor underneath it. What this truth gives you is an anchor. Not a guarantee that nothing difficult will ever happen. Jesus never promised that. And honestly, neither should I, but a guarantee that whatever does happen, you are not facing it without a plan that was made for you in advance. By someone who loves you. Practically, here's what that might look like this week. The next time you feel that tightness in your chest while scrolling through the news, try pausing just for a moment, and instead of immediately reaching for more information, try this small prayer. God, I don't have to carry this alone. You already know what's coming and you've already prepared what I'll need. You don't have to feel different right away. Just say it. Let it be true even before it feels true. And if you're someone who tends to carry the weight of the whole world, the kind of person who feels responsible for having an answer for everything, I want to gently say, that's not a job God gave you. That's a job He kept for Himself. Let me pray over this with you if you'll let me. Father, for everyone listening to this right now who feels the weight of an uncertain world, for the person lying awake at 3 a.m., for the one who feels like they have to have it all figured out, for the one who's tired of carrying fear that never seems to fully go away, I ask that you would meet them right where they are. Remind them that you are not surprised by anything happening in the world today. Remind them that just as you prepared a place for your people long before they needed it, you have already gone ahead of them, preparing what they will need for whatever tomorrow holds. Replace the anxious 3 a.m. thoughts with a quiet confidence that you are near. Help them to stay aware without becoming afraid, and to trust you without needing to understand everything first. In Jesus' name, Amen. Here's the sentence I want you to carry with you. You don't have to build your own refuge. God already prepared one, and He's not in a hurry, and neither do you have to be. Let's bring this all the way home with a few simple things you can actually carry with you. First, pay attention without panic. Jesus' first instruction wasn't don't notice what's happening. It was don't be deceived, which means staying aware is part of faithfulness. But awareness paired with trust looks completely different from awareness paired with fear. This week, when something unsettling crosses your feed, try naming it honestly, this is concerning, without letting it spiral into, this means everything is falling apart. Those are two different things, and you're allowed to hold the first without the second. Second, remember that God's preparation comes before your need, not after it. We saw this pattern again and again. Manna before the hunger, ravens before the famine, a place prepared before the crisis. If you're waiting to feel secure before you trust God, consider flipping that order. Trust first. Let the security follow. Third, when you pray about the things that worry you, try praying about the details, not just the big picture. Jesus told His followers to pray specifically about timing, about circumstances, about the hard parts. That's permission for you to do the same. God isn't only interested in your big requests. He's interested in the specific, granular things that keep you up at night. And fourth, if you're someone who's been carrying this kind of anxiety quietly, without really naming it to anyone, consider naming it. Not to fix it immediately, but just to not carry it alone. That might mean a conversation with a friend, a pastor, or simply bringing it honestly to God in prayer the way we just did together. I genuinely love to hear from you. In the comments, tell me which of these felt most true for you today. Or if you're carrying something heavy right now, feel free to leave it as a prayer request. I read every single one, and I'll be praying over them. If this video brought you even a small measure of peace, it would mean a lot if you'd hit like. It helps this message reach someone else who might need it today too. And if this kind of slow, scripture-grounded study is what your soul has been needing, I'd love to have you stick around. Hit subscribe, and you'll be joining a community of people who are walking through scripture together, not rushing past it, but actually sitting with it. If this one resonated with you, I think you'll really connect with our study on the covenant described in Daniel chapter 9. It goes even deeper into the foundation of everything we touched on today, and I believe there's something in it for you too. I'll put the link right here. Before you go, wherever you are right now, whatever you're carrying into the rest of today, I want you to hear this. You are not behind. You are not unprepared in the way you fear you are. The God who prepares places before they're needed has not forgotten you, and He is not in a hurry about you. Take a breath. You're going to be okay. Go gently into the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.